Welcome to Conversations in Black, African American History and Heritage, Greensboro, North Carolina. Here folks tell their story from their perspective, dealing with genealogy, childhood, neighborhood, segregation, parenting, and stories about life in Greensboro.
Being a member of the Chamber of Commerce.
It was interesting. I don't know how I don't remember how I got involved, but I was just, it may have been during the Hal Seaver's time, but I went on the board in 1977 and then went off the board and then came back later on the board, like 20 years later or something. But it was a great experience.
Now, when Greensboro was desegregated, you got to experience this, and tell me what your experience was, what you did during that period of desegregation of the schools and.
Well, we had an advisory committee to the school board. Joan Bleetenthal and I worked together on that, and I became a member of that because of Joan. Joan asked me to be a part of it.
What year was this?
Oh, Lord.
60.
I don't remember.
Yeah, 60.
But there was a Greensboro Community Fellowship in which Joan, Cynthia Doyle, and I were part of it. And then during the time when there was something when Greensboro started getting children nearest the school to go there, whether they were white or black or something like that. And with the Greensboro Community Fellowship, we had this meeting in which Dr. Hull, who was a Quaker, was the chair. And we organized a kindergarten at Bennett College. It was students who lived nearest the school. They were black and white. And we paired off with a black and a white to go to the different neighborhoods, encourage them to send their children to Bennett College for that summer, and got involved in that way. And then we had the advisory, out of that came the school board advisory committee. And Joan Bleetenthal was the chair, because Joan was on the board. And we had an advisory committee. And then we had retreats at, I forgot where it was, a 4-H club. And I forgot where it was. Anyway, we invited high school students and their parents to come at Betsy Penn camp, that's where it was. And we didn't have any administrators to come, and getting parents to understand when the children were going to these integrated schools, how to do it. And one of the things that came up was one black parent said that she could not go to Grimsley because they wouldn't let her come in to volunteer or see what was going on. And we learned her daughter did not want her to come and had told her she couldn't come. But it brought out a lot of things like that where you have to understand where your child is coming from when they come and bring you information like that. For the little children, the students didn't come, but the parents got together at the Betsy Penn. It was a 4-H club plant near Reesville, I think it was like that. And we did that, and we didn't let any decision-making people from the school system join us. It was a great experience.
How about the way the schools were, I know in lots of communities when the schools integrate, they change some of the high schools to elementary schools, and
Greensboro public school system was the only system that did not close any black schools. None. They all existed until this day. And they did it because the business community got involved. The Chamber of Commerce was involved. The Chamber had discussion cells and where blacks and whites could come. But if you look at your history, Greensboro was the only one that didn't have that had all this stuff going on. The only real was when the student first going to Grimsley, Josephine Boyd. That was kind of stuff, but it didn't close the schools at all. And they were getting ready to integrate Gillespie schools. Dr. Barnes' granddaughter, Deborah, was in that group, and they had hired Henry to represent them, but Henry didn't have to do anything because they didn't have any issue going to Gillespie Park.
Did you have any more information about that, about the Gillespie school integration?
No, because our boys went there. The only thing I can remember, the principal said they couldn't have a football team over there because the parents wouldn't feed their children pinto beans. And the principal was Calvin, I forgot what his last name was.
I'm gonna look through. I do want to touch on another issue of redlining of homes in Greensboro and also of financing of the building of homes in Greensboro.
That was before my time when I got involved because someone else asked me about redlining. I wasn't aware of that because when we got married in 1956, we lived on Goral Street, and we lived in Mrs. Lee's niece's home, whose husband was a minister and had been called to Florida. And so we didn't have, all we had to do was move in, didn't have to buy any furniture or anything, and we stayed there until I became pregnant in 56 to 59 with our older son, and then we moved to Cambridge Street.
Do you remember the exact addresses on Goral and Cambridge Street?
It was right in front of the driveway for the Catholic Church over there.
For on Goral?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay. For
I don't remember.
Our Lady of Miraculous Medal.
Huh?
In front of Our Lady of
Correct.
Miraculous Middle School.
Mm-hmm. And it was her niece's home that we moved to. But I'm not aware. The only thing I know is stories that Kenneth Lee used to say when he was getting ready to open American Federal Savings, because Henry was in law school at the time, and he was saying the reason why he wanted to start American Federal because he wanted to borrow some money and they would not loan him but X amount of dollars to do that. But I'm not familiar with the red line either. I just ignored it and didn't know.
How about the architects that built up Benbow Road and that area? Did you come in contact with William Street? Or
well, I knew Bill Street because I worked at Bennett for a while with his wife Louise Street, and when they were building their home, she was teaching home economics at Bennett, and one semester that's what she taught, all the things that were going on there. And Mr. W. Edward Jenkins built the house that we live in now. That was Bishop Wells' home, and I knew him. And then Gerard Gray, who taught at A&T, we had decided that we had bought property at the corner of Bennett and Goral Street. We were going to build there, and we went on to tell Gerard Gray, who was going to build it for us, what we wanted, and he said, "You all better wait until you get enough money to do what you want." And so we didn't build it. We sold that lot, and we got to know Bishop Wells pretty well, because when Henry founded Greensboro National Bank in 1972, something like that, Bishop Wells was a part of that group who founded it. And then when he died, Mrs. Wells called me and said, Bishop Wells said if anything ever happened to him, he wanted us to buy the house. And that's what we did.
Do you know anything about the building of the house or Jenkins? Did you ever meet Jenkins?
Oh, yes, I knew him well. He was a fraternity brother of Henry's. And then his daughter, who recently died, was in the same sorority that I was in. So I knew them well, and knew his wife well as well.
What was he like?
Joyful. You never saw him unhappy or anything. He was very creative, and he was an A&T graduate. And you know what they say about A&T, I mean, they're all good friends no matter what. Because when Henry founded the Greensboro National Bank, there were 2 people in there who were not graduates of A&T, but all the rest of them were A&T grads.
How about William Street, Bill Street?
He was very quiet, very, very quiet. I didn't know him well, but I knew his wife Louise much better than I knew him, but he was a very quiet person. And I wasn't that closely associated with A&T at the time.
Did you ever hear anything about a drainage system that he built under that property between the Evans and the Street home?
No.
To drain those homes? And how about other people in that area on Benbow Road?
When we moved to Benbow Road, which was in 1976, Walter Hughes lived across the street from us. The Waldens lived with the driveway through there. It was the Waldens going up toward Lee Street, the Waldens, Dave and Nell Coley. And Dave was a distant relative of mine. And then the Learys, and then Dr. Evans. And then across the street was the Fishers. And I didn't know the people on the other street next to Walt Houston, but W.L.T. Miller was there.
Was that Eva Miller's?
Eva Miller's husband.
Oh.
And then Henry had an office in the same building at one time that Dr. Miller's dental office was. And that's where the AFL-CIO is right next to House of Prayer now, that slanted thing. That's where Henry's first office was. No, his first office was with Kenneth Lee on Benbow Road, but he moved there at one point.
The slanted office that's on Bennett Street?
Beg pardon?
Is the slanted office on Bennett
Yes.
Street?
Yeah.
I know where you're talking about.
That's where Dr. Miller's office was.
And how about the social life on Benbow Road in Benbow District during that time? What was going on?
We were not very social because Henry was in the when we moved to Benbow Road. See, we didn't move to Benbow Road until '76, and during that period of time, Henry was in the legislature, and then from the legislature he went to the court, and our children were small, and we were not social butterflies.
You had no time, it doesn't sound like. I do remember cookouts being, people would have Saturday cookouts and things.
But we never attended one of them.
We were coming and going.
We were not included.
Did you know the Davises? Ann Davis and
I
Effie
did.
Davis?
I did. Dr. Davis was the medical person for A&T when I was a student there, and I lived with Mrs. Lee, 1016 South Benbow Road, and then they were on the other side over there, and with Ann Davis, and she was a member of the same sorority that I was. And we had made several meetings over there but I knew them well.
And what was his role at A&T as the student physician? What did he do? What was involved?
If you went to the health center, that's who you went. That's who you saw.
And that was the one that's sort of across from
The engineering
Nocho? Well, whatever that street is. Noco Road? No.
Noco Street, yeah. Well,
Noco
you know where the old
Street.
engineering building is.
Yes.
Well, it was right across from there. Now it's a faculty house or something like that, where the faculty goes for relaxing, I guess.
That reminds me to ask about the Windsor Center and to ask you about the role in the community of the Windsor Center. And
it was very broad. As a student during the summer, I worked at the pool. Mrs. Lee rented suits for the kids to go swimming, and I was in the rack room to hang up the musty clothes and that kind of thing. And Windsor had a swimming team. They were little frogs. I mean, they could really go, but they could not compete with the white students in that one.
They weren't allowed to, or
they weren't allowed to, and they were really good. And Mr. Levette was the executive director at that time, and Levette Field right across Gate City Boulevard now, there's a little baseball field on the right. Windsor Center stands here, but on the right down there is the Levette Field where they had baseball, and they named it for him. But they had all kinds of activities. They had a women's group, and when the retired teachers would meet there sometimes, other times at Hayes Taylor. It was a very, very active place, and they had bridge groups, and bid whist groups, and all that kind of stuff down there.
Have you heard about the new?
I have, yes.
Tell about what you think that would mean for the community. And
well, you know, I think it would be a good thing, but one of the saddest times of my life, and I choose not to say who was against it, but there were people on Bimba Road who did not want the library placed there because it would cause too much traffic, not thinking about the value of a library being where it is today.
the Vance Chavis.
The Vance Chavis learning place. But I think it's an excellent idea.
It sounds like it's going to be fabulous. Let's see here. I'm going to just go through a few things, and if there are things that you think of that I have not covered that would be important to cover, please also talk about that.
I've always said that Greensboro is a place that allows you to be. And you can finish that be wherever. Because personally, Greensboro has been good to us. And I say that because of all the things that I have been allowed to do and Henry has been allowed to do, and how we were able to do it without reservations. When Henry chose, from the time we were dating, Henry always said he wanted to start a bank. And I would say to him, I don't understand how you can start a bank when you don't have any money. But the white bankers got together, and usually if a person leaves that bank, they can't do anything with the bank until, because that would be competitive to them. But they allowed those people who left their bank to come and help Henry with the bank that was being opened.
Tell me the name of the bank that he
Greensboro
started.
National Bank. And it merged with not Mechanics, it was Savings Bank first, and then it merged with Mechanics and Farmers Bank. But it met with success, at least while Henry was there. When he went on the court, he had to, to let go, and then they decided to merge it with Mechanics and Farmers Bank. But I we've been allowed to do whatever we chose to do. And I always say, because I've always treated people like I want to be treated. And that has allowed Henry as well, who had the same motives that I did. And our boys have met with success in Greensboro. And so have our grands. They're all public school graduates, our grandchildren.
It's wonderful. Have you met the A&T 4?
A&T 4?
Uh-huh.
Oh, yes.
Tell me about them.
Franklin McCain. I knew him more. I didn't know him. He was a student. Was a great guy. You know, he got a corporate job, and he did extremely well with that, and we enjoyed it. I didn't know David Richmond as well as I did the others, but Ezell Blair I knew well. I called him my child, and then Joseph McNeil, who's a colonel. He's still a good friend of ours, and they named a street in Wilmington for him. But they were all independent thinkers. I always say their parents taught them to be independent thinkers, and that's why they were able to do what they did. I heard the other day what somebody said the idea really came from Bennett College. I don't know that from a group of women, but I do know that these young men decided overnight that's what they were going to do. But there was also a white gentleman that was very encouraging, and that was Ralph Johns, who had a clothing store that clothed a lot of A&T students.
I had not heard that story before. Tell me
Ralph
more.
Johns?
Uh-huh.
Ralph Johns was a white guy whose clothing shop was almost, it was about where where the library is now?
Yes.
Just before you get to the library, on the right side, over there. You look up Ralph Johns.
I think I have heard the name, but I
Google
just
him.
don't know much about it. I think I have heard it, but not paying attention right. How about Jesse Jackson?
Who?
Jesse Jackson. Have you met him? And
Well, he was a student at A&T, and he had to be almost forced to participate in the activity. And then after he got in there, he realized how important it was. The person that was a part of all of that was Louis Brandon. He can tell you all that history, but I wasn't at A&T at the time.
do you know anything more about Ronald McNair?
Ron McNair. I did not know him. I wish I did. My granddaughter teaches at the Ron McNair School now. But he's a person to really be respected. I was able to introduce him when he came back once, because he came and spoke downtown. But that's the only time I had known about him.
Is there anything that you want to tell us about the Southern Railroad station, the depot now? Anything that you recall that happened there? Anything?
No, because the only time that way back that I used the train station was going to Syracuse University, and when I got on the train, when I got to New York, I thought I was in Syracuse, and realized I had to ride just as long as I did from New York City to Syracuse as I did from Greensboro to New York. But I had no relationships with that at all, but was delighted when they named it for Doug Gallium, because he was a wonderful person.
Do you recall ever sitting in the segregated section of the depot?
Yes, yes, yes.
Tell me about that.
I think I do. As I said, a lot of things that weren't pleasant for me, I wiped them away. And I really can't remember. Excuse me. I think that I didn't really sit in there, because when I got ready to go to Syracuse, somebody came and we were talking, and I just went in to get my ticket and left at the time, and going to the front of the train station to ride, not in the back, because it was more dangerous and they put black folk up front.
Any experiences with Magnolia House?
Yes. African Americans could not, or students at A&T could not use the hotels. So Henry was a member of Beta Kappa Chi, and they had a party there. And I went with another guy who was a brilliant student. His last name was Ellis. And he got inebriated and fell out. And I was embarrassed. And I looked over there, and there was Henry at a table playing beer whist and just enjoying himself, drinking a Coke. And I said, wouldn't it be nice to have come with somebody like that? Well, you know how kids are, when we got ready to go, because I didn't live on campus, everybody piled in almost in the same car. And I was the first to be dropped off at 1016 South Benbow Road. And I got out of the car, and this guy came to the door with me, and I had my key ready, and I just went in and closed the door in his face. And Henry says, when he got back in the car, the guy said, if you all had been here, I'd gotten a good kiss. Not from me. But that was at the Magnolia House. I knew Mrs. Gist through my Girl Scout work. On August the 24th, after our rehearsal, Mrs. Gist gave us our rehearsal party at the Magnolia House in August 24th, 1956. And
So this is your wedding rehearsal?
My wedding rehearsal. And this day I am working with Miss Pass Miller on helping to revive it to this day. And it brings back all kinds of memory. But Mrs. Gist was, I didn't know Mr. Gist, but I knew Mrs. Gist. And Henry knew her sons well.
Were there any celebrities that you saw that came to the
Nat
stage
King
there?
Cole was there one night. I saw him, and there were others, but you know, as I told you, Henry was a nerd, so we didn't pay that kind of stuff.
What was Nat King Cole like?
Oh, very calm and very nice. And Jackie Robinson stayed there one night as well. Oh, I don't know how many nights he stayed. But Jackie Robinson helped Henry in developing the Greensboro National Bank, and we were with him several times.
Oh, that's special. Any stories there? Any further details?
No, other than Henry was meeting with some of the people that were helping him develop, and I didn't know that Jackie Robinson was a diabetic, and I loved to bake, and I had made a coconut cake, and I was going to serve them this cake with coffee, and he said that he couldn't eat that, and he needed some. They didn't have the
Insulin?
I'm trying to think of what we used.
Oh,
Artificial
yeah.
flavor,
Yeah.
but they didn't have those packet. So I slipped out the back door. We were living on Drexmore Avenue then, and I went to the store and got some Sweet Tina. And that it's a liquid that you put in coffee and serve that. And he couldn't use that either. So it was an interesting experience for me.
I know that Nat King Cole also had a relationship to Palmer Memorial. Do you know anything about that?
No, I do not. But I knew he did. And then after Nat Cole died, Dr. Gibbs' daughter-in-law that was married to a woman that lived on Ross Avenue was a good friend of his wife. And I met her through, I can't think of her name right now.
Anything about Palmer Memorial and Charlotte Hawkins Brown? Anything you
No,
recall of
No,
or heard about that?
no. Oh, I just knew about it, but I don't know anything personally about it.
Was there any interaction between A&T and Palmer Memorial?
Not to my knowledge. It's not to suggest that there was not, but I didn't know about it.
I think early on they had some, but
I don't
maybe
know.
not at that point.
I think we've come a long ways, and it's been slow, but we've come a long ways. Now you can go to almost any church in Greensboro and see black and white people. And that didn't happen, and they are welcomed in a good way. And if you start with the church, I think you can spread out and see it in a number of ways as well. I used to work in television. Now, watch the commercials. And you see all kinds of people. You see integrated couples in everywhere. That never happened before. But you can see little things, and I think it's been positive. And I think it's been hard to come in some instances, but some people who were determined to treat people as human beings, it has happened. And I think that I could say that churches have played a large role in it, but also I can give the business community in Greensboro a lot of credit. And I'll start with the chamber. The chamber started integrating a long time before other people did. And you look at those discussion cells that they had, people were allowed to come and do and talk and challenge. My husband is from Ellerby, North Carolina, and they had certain days that you could register to vote, and they were on Saturdays. And so on August 25th, 1956 was one of those Saturdays. So he and the minister who married us, who was a good friend of his, decided to go and register to vote. When he got there, the registrar asked him, a female, asked him a lot of questions about the signing of the Declaration of Independence and that kind of stuff. And he refused to answer them and said to her, I don't need to do anything but be able to read and write. And pulled out a little desk that she had, said, see, it's right here in the book. This is what you're supposed to be. It was female or male, I don't know which one it was. And he says, well, you're saying I didn't pass? And the person said, that is correct, you didn't answer the questions. And so he said, okay. And came to Greensboro. Ellerby is 72 miles from Greensboro. Came to Greensboro, and I'm walking down the aisle thinking that my husband-to-be was standing at the altar smiling. And I thought maybe he was smiling and say, here comes my future wife. I got to the altar, and he leaned over and whispered to me, do you know they wouldn't let me register to vote today? And I looked at him and said, well, can we talk about it later? And he said, yes. And so after he was elected to the legislature, his first bill that he introduced was to get rid of the literacy test. And during the time it was being introduced, he talked, and one member of the legislature got up and said that this bill has nothing to do with race. And Henry responded by sharing his experience of what had happened to him. And it passed unanimously. I don't know whether it's unanimous or not, but it passed by a large margin in the House. And then it was to go to the Senate. And news media had said it was least likely bill to pass. Southern Bell had a booklet where it listed all the legislators, Senate and House. Henry took that Southern Bell information book and had 3 columns, yes, no, and maybe. And he went to each member of the House, of the Senate, and asked if they would support the bill. And whoever said yes, he marked that, and it also passed the Senate. It went to the voters that November, and the voters did not agree to it. It's still on the books of North Carolina. It's not active because federal supersedes whatever that was.
Thank you for sharing.
And as one radio reporter would say, and that's the end of the story.
Well, that takes me to your TV station experience. Tell me what that was.
I was hired as the community relations manager, and about 8 or 10 months after that, I was promoted to vice president. And I agreed to go on the condition I would never have to appear on television. The interesting thing about when I say that I was promoted to vice president, I don't know whether you remember Mo Milani, who was the executive vice president of hospitality for the Coury Convention Center, or the Coury Business Hospitality area. But it was when the golf tournament the first ACC tournament in Greensboro. And Channel 2, which I was working, had a significant role in doing that. And we had a hospitality area out there and everything. The owners of Gannett were Duke fans, and they decided to come to Greensboro, come to North Carolina to the tournament that was in Greensboro. And they had tickets, but nowhere to stay. And so the general manager came to me and said, Shirley, John and his brother, who was over the newspaper side, can't find a room. So I called Mo Milani and told him what we needed. And he said, Shirley, there's nothing I can do because I sold the hotel to the ACC. He said, but what I could do is I could reserve a room, 3 rooms for you. And then by the time they get here, I'll change it to them. Both of us forgot it. So they come from McLean, Virginia, the corporate office of Gannett. And they get to the hotel, which the general manager of F&Y had said where they could stay. And they didn't have a room. And so the secretary of the general manager happened to still be at the station. So they called and said, we don't have any reservation. So he said, well, check and see if it's in the name of WFNY. No, it's not the name of it. So then she said, well, check Shirley Frye. They said, who is Shirley Frye? And they told them, that I was community relations. And they said, oh yeah, she has 3 rooms. And it was for them. Well, they got in the room. And later on, Mo Milani says he was responsible for my being vice president because we got rooms for the people to stay. But working at Channel 2 was a wonderful experience, and I think I enjoyed it because I had never worked, because I call the public school system a nonprofit organization. I never worked for an organization that I could use my what I call creative juices, have an idea and take it and share it with somebody else, and they develop it, and then you see what your idea comes to fruition. And the other one was that I was working with young people. I enjoy working with young people. And they were all, I was the oldest thing they included, older than the general manager, because I was 60 when I went to the station. And the only person that was near my age was Lee Kinder. So, but it was a great experience also because it gave me an umbrella to continue my volunteer work. And I was able to even help more in many ways. And you learn so much from that way. Case in point, we developed a program called Call 911 and Save a Heart. And we did it with the Heart Association. What I learned during that time is, and I use it to this day, the hospitals take those people who come by ambulance first, because it appears that they are more seriously needed the hospital than those people who drive there. And so that's why you have to sit and wait a long time. Because about a year ago, I ended up at the hospital because I had stomach pains with something that I had eaten. And I stayed in the waiting room 5 hours. And one of the nurses came through and asked me what was I doing there. And she said, well, you should see the other side. It was on a Friday. And she said, it's terrible over there. And then I realized I had forgotten. And I realized what was happening. And so I felt a little better. And I left without being served. And I'm here today, to tell the story.
I was just going to follow up also on Lee Kynard and Sandra Hughes. So you worked with Sandra
I worked with
Hughes?
them, yeah. They were wonderful people. And Lee started the morning show because Channel 2 was the organization that started the Good Morning Show, even before CBS started one. Because if you remember, earlier, the Good Morning Show started early, and CBS, we didn't pick that up until 8 o'clock. But from 5:30 at that time until 8 o'clock, it was.
Were you getting out that early too? When did you have to be there? You didn't have to be there that early.
Oh, that had to be at the station?
At the station.
No, mine was Monday through Friday. But they were not on Saturday and Sunday either, because they were, the Good Morning Show was there, and you had Pecos Pete and all that other kind of stuff.
Yeah. I didn't check with you also on the churches that you attended after the, you said initially you were at Bethany.
I was at Bethel with Mrs. Lee. We got married August 25th, 1956, and joined Providence Baptist Church in November 1956. And we've been there since.
So were you at the original Providence when it was on, in the little, near the railroad tracks? And
but that wasn't the original one, but we were there on the railroad tracks, yes. And people used to call it A&T's church, because most of the faculty and presidents and chancellors were members of Providence.
Was that not the original one?
I'm sorry?
Wasn't that the original Providence Baptist Church? It was just...
I don't know. It may have been. Yeah. I really don't know. But Reverend Tynes was the minister when we went there.
And anything else about Providence you want to tell?
Providence believes in educating its young people. And each year since we were there, they have scholarships they provide for students to go. And they've had a SAT preparation course for young people for at least 40 years now. And helped them with it. Our youngest granddaughter participated in it, and she was tested when she came in, and her grade point, it rose at least 120 points after that. So they do a great job in doing that.
What was the feeling of the community when urban renewal took out the old church and the church had to rebuild?
Providence didn't complain so much because it came, we could walk to Providence if we chose to. But they didn't complain too much about the church having to move because it had grown and needed growth. But what they complained more about was losing the black businesses that were in that particular area.
And then another story that you had related was with Chavis and Leary, and
well, as I said much earlier, Mr. Leary was my mentor. I mean, I will forever be grateful to him because he helped me with my success that I had in teaching. And Mr. Chavis was one who was a good friend of both Henry and mine and helped us understand the community and that kind of thing. And both were in the field of education. At that time, you had the North Carolina Teachers Association, which was the black group, and the North Carolina Association of Educators, which was the white group. And they all met in Raleigh, but when the North Carolina Teachers Association would meet in Raleigh, and you'd ride with Mr. Leary or Mr. Chavis, if we got hungry along the way, they could stop and go into any restaurant and buy our food because they didn't know whether they were white or black.
and so he was just a young.
He was a young lawyer.
Lawyer
Yeah.
when he was representing that case, but
Yeah,
they
but it
ended
never became a case. They had hired him, but he didn't have to do anything. But he was prepared to do so. And we were neighbors because the Barnes lived across the street. We lived on the other side of the street.
Good. I think that.
It's I'm curious when you talk about these different things, like you mentioned when you made your trip to Raleigh. You don't have any. I'm being observant of your tone. You don't have any resentment or grudge in you about the things that have happened.
No, I think my faith has carried me through that kind of thing. And if you carry a grudge, you're the one that's worried, not the other person. One of the best examples I can think of. Remember when George Wallace, I don't know when he was running for president, something like that. A white lady came up to Henry and said, "I'm going to vote for you and George Wallace because you all need somebody down there." And Henry said to him that was a sense of fairness, because even though she was going to vote for George Wallace, she thought black people needed a person in there. But I don't hold any animosity against anybody because I don't want them to hold it against me. And what I try to do is treat you like I want to be treated. And so far, it's been pretty good to follow that. But, those things happened, and you have to work with people, have direct dialogue, because you were not responsible for that. Somebody else in the past did. So if we work together, we can solve that issue. So why should I have any resentment when I can't do anything about what happened in the past? But what I can do is to work hard to make sure that history doesn't repeat itself. And I guess that's why it's good to love history, and that is to make sure that we don't repeat it.
High, there's a lot of responsibility. Why is it important for young people in particular today to learn from things like this and to take on responsibility and to be involved with the community?
Well, I think you need to be a good model for your children, and if they see you doing things, more often than not, they will follow through. And we taught them to be independent thinkers. Even though it may be against what you would like to see them do, you need to show them that you trust them and that you know that they will do a good job, and constantly encourage them and show them how much you appreciate how they are involved in treating people like they want to be treated.
Have you ever heard the saying, and some people acquainted with Dr. Gibbs, some with Ms. Player from Bennett, but we don't teach them what to think, we teach them to think.
Let me correct that. That did not come from Dr. Player. It came from Dr. Wormuth T. Gibbs. And somehow somebody has associated that with Dr. Player, but Dr. Player did not originate that. It was Dr. Gibbs. But I think I think it's, no matter who said it, it's a good quote. But I think the best thing is the model that you show your children or other people. I mean, you can try to teach them all that you can do, all you want to, but unless you practice what you preach, is to no avail. So what we try to do is to be good models for them. It's interesting because we didn't realize it. Our younger son said before we died, the one thing he wanted to see us is my husband and I argue with each other. But we say there's no need to argue, we negotiate, and I you know, it's not that we have not had a disagreement, but it's just that and then when people get upset, it's not that particular thing. It's usually when you allow a lot of things to pile up, and we have never gone to bed angry with each other, ever. And we continue to do that.
You're certainly role models for the community and for your family.
Well, I think it's important to practice what you preach. I've had almost 66 years of the most wonderful marriage that I have ever wanted. And I'll say years, months, minutes, months. I've never regretted it.
So human blockhead, it's one of the easiest sideshow tricks to ever learn. One of the first things freak show performers start off with.
that. You probably familiar with that. And they just shoot it to us as we're en route. So, I actually like it because it just lets you know what you're kind of walking into. And then, sometimes you get on the scene and be something totally different.
Yeah.
You just never know till you actually get there and assess what's going on.
And all that depends on the caller and the call taker.
Yep, all that. There you go. Exactly. We're going to 4205 Hewitt Street, and it is a domestic dispute between the caller here. Apparently, the girlfriend is upset with him or whatever. She took his keys and cars and ran out the front door.
3133, switch over to D2 correspondent, 3133.
So we're gonna be en route to that.
3133.
See what's going on with that. This domestic here, I got a funny feeling we're gonna have to actually go into this guy's house. So we'll just assess it when we get there.
This is on West Philly Avenue. Caller involved in the middle of chasing a female. The female's now inside with him. Correction, the female's inside with her, the caller. And the caller advised she's 232 with a shotgun. And advised she's pointing it at the door to keep the male from coming inside the residence.
That actually spawned out of military concept of the warriors battling the wolf, protecting the flock. And it kind of transfers over to a lot of any career that is public safety driven. Police, obviously, fire, us, in that we're there for the protection of those that need our help. And it may not be protection to prevent something bad from happening all the time. A lot of times from our end of it, it's after things have gone wrong, and so we're coming in to kind of help them. So in a way, collectively we're all sheepdogs, and now that has become a moniker for police, fire, EMS, but can easily transfer over to anyone who's in a public safety or humanitarian type profession.
Yeah. Please. Conditions are one Adam.
We just had a plane crash into Level 4 of the World Trade Center, transmit a second alarm, and start relocating companies into the area. Battalion 1 is also sending the whole consignment on this box to that area, okay?
2 Victor only. Conditions 04, switch to citywide. I need all other units to 10-6 unless you have a priority message.
Engine 6 to Manhattan, okay?
Engine 6.
The World Trade Center, tower number 1 is on fire. The whole outside of the building, there was just a huge explosion.